Hello, my name is Patrick Ollett. I'm from John Holland, Sustainability Manager on NorthLink Southern Section. I'm delivering an ISCA showcase today, and first of all I'd like to thank ISCA for the opportunity to share our learnings. The agenda today, we're going to cover three main areas. We're going to give you a quick overview of the project. We're going to look at some of the highlights that we have generated by applying the ISCA framework and IS tool. And then we're going to finish with some top tips, things that have helped us along the journey. So overview, you'll be able to see in the slide there an aerial shot of the job. It's about 6 kilometres worth of road. It's going to be reconstructed to a full freeway standard, and the sets of lights that were along there, some quite dangerous intersections, are going to be grade separated. You can see in the shot there that it's in a heavily urban area. You might be able to make out the fact that the Perth CBD is about 15 kilometres to the west, and beyond that is the port of Fremantle. You can see the Swan River there, but it's probably the most notable feature is that it is a heavy urban area. In addition, there's quite a lot of industrial zones there, the greyer patches you can see there in the aerial shot. And this route will be a freight route that will take freight from Perth, the airport and the port, north up to that economic hub that is the northwest, including the Pilbara. Okay, that's an overview of where the job is. It's important to note who the client is. The client is Main Roads, government department within the transport agency within the transport portfolio, responding to the Minister for Transport. They deliver all major road projects in Western Australia. This one is a federal and state-funded project, and it's catering for Perth with a population of 3.5 million. The section we deliver, the project we're delivering is one of three parts of an overall program, which is called NorthLink WA. As I explained previously, it'll provide the major northern route out of Perth. John Holland is responsible for the southern section, a design and construction contract worth about $200 million. John Holland have an array of supporting partners, including Oricon, who are our designers. At the moment, we've completed the 100% design. We're about 6 months into the construction program with approximately another 12 months to go. The next slide there has an overview of the full NorthLink program. Our bit is the small pink fraction at the bottom. It is different from the other sections, which are greenfield jobs. Ours is a brownfield job, and we interact more heavily with live traffic throughout. It's a major constraint for us. Another thing to point out in this overview is Main Roads' strategy. They have a strategy which they articulate called Keeping WA Moving. Central to that is sustainability. And the fact they have this strategy makes our life easier in delivering the ISCA framework. It means they've done quite a lot of pre-work and forward thinking. If you look on the slide there, you can see that their strategy is considering Perth with a population up and above 3.5 million, and considering what good looks like in those scenarios. And the fact that they have that strategy has fed its way into our contract documents in many ways. I'd also like to add that this strategic direction that Main Roads has is complementary to John Holland's own sustainability strategy, corporate sustainability strategy, which is called our Sustainability Pathway and is underpinned by three key focus areas: great place to work, better lives, future thinking. These corporate strategies are definitely useful for leveraging at a project level. And finally, I'd also like to point out that Main Roads and John Holland are ISCA members and familiar with ISCA and their tools, so that's had us well placed as well. Okay, on to the highlights. What I would say, this is just a small selection of the highlights. some of the more noteworthy ones. Some of the ones that we have a very high confidence around delivering, given that we're only just finishing 100% design and partway through construction. The important thing to note is that there's been many contributing people and organisations that have helped us arrange these highlights or be able to obtain them. Okay, so the first one that's worth noting is we took an approach to decision making that was underpinned by lifecycle assessment. So lifecycle assessment is a way of considering all impacts associated with a product, activity or service, right from its inception through to its use, and then ultimately its disassembly or re-entry into the life cycle. It's a true cradle to grave or cradle to cradle assessment. It is like a materiality assessment, but is perhaps more robust than others that are out there because it considers the biggest picture. We've used that throughout design to inform our decision making. I'm aware of others who have used it at the end to tell their story, at the end of the design process to tell their story. Yeah, we believe it's innovative to have used it iteratively through the design process, and it has enabled us to identify which are the truly biggest impacts, especially under that using resources category. The fact that we used it early on in the design process pointed to us that there was big opportunities, or big impacts and big opportunities around operational lighting on this road and also asphalt. And that in turn enabled us to place our attention there and yield bigger bang for buck later on. And that'll come up again in some subsequent innovations, which I'm going to talk about. Applying the life cycle assessment allowed us to ultimately to demonstrate approximately a 20% overall improvement in relation to the carbon footprint. Okay, so I mentioned asphalt there. Asphalt is important on this road. This is going to be a road used heavily by the freight industry. The road needs to be durable and to be able to withstand road trains and the like. The asphalt is therefore quite thick. It's what's referred to as a full depth asphalt. Approximately a foot of solid asphalt is incorporated in the road surface. Obviously that has big impacts. A number of initiatives that we've realised a number of initiatives in relation to that asphalt. The first one is the fact that we have managed to demonstrate that the design life of the road or of that asphalt can exceed what was specified, which was a 40-year design life, and head up towards 100 years. It isn't immediately obvious the significance of this innovation, but upon reflection within a life cycle assessment, it becomes clear that swapping out that asphalt after 40 years and again after 80 years would have been a huge impost, both environmentally and economically. And the fact that we can now demonstrate for the first time that if managed correctly it will last 100 years is a big deal and has large implications for asset management and the expenditure of taxpayers' money in future. Other things we did with the asphalt was we managed to incorporate a new kind of binder which allows the road to be stiffer yet thinner. We used one called a C600 binder, and that reduced the thickness by about 7%. That's incorporated across the piece. A similar initiative that we're looking at or that we're piloting is the use of EME asphalt. We're going to do it in a pilot along about a 700 metre stretch of the road, and it will reduce the thickness by a further 15% or thereabouts, and that will enable us to, or main roads to demonstrate its effectiveness in due course and hopefully apply it on future projects, which is a significant improvement considering how much of the overall impacts are generated by the asphalt. The other thing with asphalt is that up until very recently, main roads didn't permit the recycled content of the asphalt to be more than 10%. So you weren't allowed to incorporate more than 10% of an old road into a new road. We've been discussing with them how we can improve on that. And that has come about through discussion with Main Roads, our supplier Boral, and ourselves. But when we've talked to Main Roads, we've gone in through the project team that we work for directly, and they have connected us up with subject matter experts that sit further afield in Main Roads, some of their technical experts, and that has allowed a memorandum of understanding to be produced whereby we can hopefully go up to 15% recycled content in the asphalt in the short term, and then in the medium term, so later this year, we're hoping to get up to 25%. So that's a good example of collaboration and something that's worked out well with our asphalt initiatives. I should note that a couple of the items, well, one item in particular, the C600, the initial initiative that allowed the asphalt to become thinner, was specified by the client, and that reflects their proactive attitude. They'd picked up that innovation from a job that had gone previously, and they're in the course they're attempting to make that business as usual by including it in specifications like ours. The fact that it was in the spec alerted us to its presence, of course, and we've arranged for it to be delivered. It also gave us impetus to move into the other areas that might be available to us, like the EME asphalt. All right, lighting. So lighting, again, the Lifecycle Assessment told us that lighting was a big impact. It's particularly the lights that were going to be on for the next 100 years. They would be burning through electricity. And in fact, that was the single biggest environmental impact by some distance. And so we focused on what was possible. Again, we went to meet Main Roads as subject matter experts. That was facilitated by Main Roads' project delivery team. On that occasion, we went and met them with our designer, and it quickly became apparent in the course of those discussions that there were additional options available to us that we had previously understood weren't. And immediately we were able to realise an increase in the spacing of the poles on the main line from about 50 metre spacing to about 80 metre spacings. And we've got a corresponding saving in capital investment, but also electricity bills in due course. So that was a quick win and relatively simple. So then we moved into some more creative spaces. When we did the life cycle assessment, our consultants suggested to us that we look at dimming. We talked with the subject matter experts about that, and they said that it wasn't possible due to regulation on the main line, but that there was a possibility for it on the principal shared path or the bicycle path. And there's a large number of light poles along that path, and the discussion carried on, and we realised that not many people will be using that path through the middle of the night. We didn't want to turn the lights off entirely for crime prevention reasons, but that there was an opportunity to dim the lights. And so we were able to dim the lights through the middle period of the night, and we got about a 15% saving overall of energy from those lights. So that was a good outcome. Another example of something that was, we were led to the water by Main Roads, so this is another initiative for something new, was something called adaptive lighting. So there's some technology you can put into lamps that stops them burning too bright, and that often happens when you put in new lights. They burn brighter than they need to and burn more electricity than they need to. And so there's some technology, it's called adaptive lighting, that allows the supply of electricity to those lights to be metered, and the light only gets what it needs. This has two benefits. One, that the light doesn't burn as much electricity over its life. You get about a 10% saving by our estimates. But also the lamp lasts for longer, so it goes from lasting from 4 years to 6 years. And, in a 100-year life, that's quite a lot. I think it goes from being swapped out 25 times to about 16 times. So that was significant as well. The other thing worth mentioning with lighting is, we've just come across this recently, that we were just finding just now that with our temporary lights, which we've got a lot of temporary light towers out there for traffic management, in the order of 20 or 30 temporary light columns. And we're finding just now that we're getting a crossover between the cost of diesel generated and solar powered lights. The solar ones now are cost neutral with the diesel generated ones. So we've just signed up a supplier actually to give us about 20 of those for the remainder of the job. It's just an interesting, a year ago that wasn't the case, but now it is. So the technology, with the prices reducing it with technology like solar power, is making them more viable more often. Okay, the next highlight. This is a multifaceted highlight, but it's basically about lean design. There's nothing revolutionary in a lot of the wins that we had from lean design. It's basically good engineering, asking an engineer to do more with less. And we did that by asking to concentrate on precast and modular systems so that the items could be manufactured in a controlled environment with less wastage. We also had that emphasis on durability. You saw that when I talked about the asphalt design life, increasing from 40 years towards 100 years. We managed to achieve something very similar with the noise walls, with our durability consultant confirming that once anti-graffiti paint had been applied to the noise walls, the durability would rise significantly, in fact to the point that they would hit 100 years also. So that was an increase from 50 to 100 years. We asked our designers to dematerialise, especially concrete and steel, given that they're high impact items. And they were able to do that, especially on the major structures that are at the junctions, the grade separated junctions, Collier, Morley and Benara. And then finally, we just asked them to reduce the extent of noise walls, pit and pipes and retaining walls. They were able to do this without detrimentally affecting the performance of the asset. And in some cases, passive design options, such as around drainage, where you avoid pit and pipe and you avoid introducing hard assets, but you go for vegetated drainage, swales or basins, the performance was able to be improved whilst the impacts were reduced. So that lean design was an ongoing focus, which yielded significant benefits in the scheme of things. The next benefit is about connectivity. That picture there is of a rather grand arch, which is going to be an underpass. That underpass will facilitate the movement of kids from their school to their houses. The school's catchment is largely on the opposite side of the road from where the school is, and this was a subject of a sensitive topic and an item of great consternation. Main Roads, prior to our appointment, was engaged with the school and working up to potential solutions. After we were appointed, this solution was proposed, and whilst it was more expensive than the typical approaches, the investment was considered to be warranted for the kids and for the larger public. What you've got is a very high open structure. It's 5.5 metres high. I think your typical box culvert's about 2.8 metres. And you've got its alignment such that you can see from connecting roads from several hundred metres away right through and out the far end, such that it provides good natural surveillance. Another noteworthy point about this structure is that it's actually leaner than a typical box culvert. There's less concrete in it, given the properties of the arch. It is more expensive, but it's leaner. It's a leaner option. We talked to the suppliers of these arches, and we believe this is the first such arch to be used for a pedestrian underpass in the country. And all feedback from the stakeholders, particularly the school, is very positive at this point. On connectivity, it's also worth noting that next to the road will be a 4-metre PSP. Now, up until recently, I believe this is the first project to have a 4-metre wide PSP along its full length. I think there are 4-metre PSPs elsewhere, but just short sections in the state. 4-metre PSP is very wide. It's wider than your average traffic lane. I think your average traffic lane is 3.5 metres. So it allows for a parent, a pram, a dog, a bicycle. Everyone can fit up and down there. I think in future it'll allow for increased uptake of the electric bicycles and the like. And it has a number of, well, it has been designed to connect into local roads to enable greater connectivity. And I think upon completion, the locals will be well happy compared to what was there before. Okay, on a similar vein, or actually quite related, is urban design. The urban design, I think it's important to point out that includes revegetation and landscaping, but also consideration of things like drainage basins, drainage systems, noise barriers, screen walls, and public art. It's a kind of a fulcrum of all those topics. The urban design has been meticulously planned. Main Roads prepared a document called the Landscape and Urban Design and Aesthetics Strategy, which advocated a coherent approach across the full program, the NorthLink program, and also other jobs which have gone before, like Gateway to the south. We have implemented this strategy, which has been subject to review by the likes of the state architect, Main Roads as architect, and then in turn our independent certifier. Highlights include, or noteworthy features of the solution that we've arrived at, includes the fact that we're going to have 36 hectares of native vegetation, and beforehand there was only 33 hectares of vegetation, much of which wasn't native and was heavily degraded. So we've got a net increase in the amount of vegetated area. We're going to manage to salvage and or replace existing street trees, which are on some of the connecting roads within the local government at an increased ratio. We're going to have a wildflower way theme which promotes Western Australia's unique and abundant flora, but also enables that theme to be carried right through the NorthLink program, which will allow a unique experience for the travelling public. And then we have a public art solution that attends to noise walls, screen walls, structures, and it reflects also the colour palette from the wildflower way. The solutions within the urban design will be durable and low maintenance, and will apply the crime prevention through environmental design principles throughout. Again, I think what you're going to have there is a satisfied stakeholder in the community once these things hit maturation. Okay, another highlight which is worth talking about is partnering. Given that Main Roads have done such a lot of work prior to our involvement, we've sought to leverage all of it and the people who are involved in that. That said, we've also tried to partner downstream with our supply chain. We've worked with people like the Australian Sustainability Supply Chain School, and I think we held the first workshop of its kind in collaboration with them, where we invited in our suppliers to tell them what sustainability, or to help them understand what sustainability is from their point of view, and raise awareness and hopefully their capability and in turn ours. It was well received. We sent out a survey, and I think 80% of the respondents said it was very relevant to their work, if not extremely. And we're going to organise a follow-up with our appointed contractors in February or March to try and consolidate on that initial session. Complementary to that, we've been running our supplier evaluation process, which we run through the procurement phase for all the packages, where we try and use their capability and know-how to help rank our preferred contractors. And in some cases that has helped us, those conversations and that process has led us to being able to identify innovations which we may not have otherwise come across. The EME Asphalt pilot is an example we weren't necessarily aware of our suppliers' capability to deliver such things until they told us. And subsequently, discussions with Main Roads led to the pilot. So, by applying the ISCA framework, we've been able to yield cost benefits. Capital expenditure, John Holland's capital expenditure has been reduced as a result of applying the scheme. We're still nailing down how much we've saved, but it is in the order of millions, and it certainly outweighs any costs we've invested in the process. So we've had a return there. In relation to whole of life cost, I'm not exactly sure what Main Roads has outlaid, but we can see again significant savings for them that will be yielded by the application of the ISCA framework, and including some of those examples I just shared with you guys. All right, top tips. So here we've got a bit of a mind map, and apologies if it's a little bit confusing. The main things to look at are the orange bubbles with large text, and I'll try and work through those. As always, with all things, leadership is critical. I think both Main Roads and John Holland are striving to lead in this area on a corporate level. But when we had to apply or demonstrate leadership on this particular project, the creation of a group that we call the Sustainability Leadership Committee has been very effective. We've had membership from John Holland, project manager, and Main Roads as project director. So the top leaders from both organisations attend virtually all the meetings, as do most of their lieutenants. And we have a cross-section of the team represented, from commercial to construction to community stakeholder engagement, environment, and so on. So that Sustainability Leadership Committee, which meets once a month, I think if I was to go looking for an ISCA accreditation again or a certification again, that'd be the first thing I do, is set that up and make sure that they meet monthly. The membership needs to be arranged so that committee is able to reach back into their organisations, particularly on the Main Road side, where you need to go back towards people who manage technical advice and specifications, but also back in time into the planning phase, people who are aware of what's going on in that space. Likewise for John Holland. The next point is collaboration. So once you've got that committee there, you need to leverage it and get the collaboration that you need. And the collaboration needs to extend beyond the committee towards your supply chain, but also the community. The collaboration shouldn't always be voluntary. You should be looking to utilise contractual arrangements where possible, such that the collaboration is underpinned by something solid. When it comes to managing the day-to-day, you need a systematic approach and a dedicated facilitator or coordinator. And I think in that regard, it's very good to have your ISCA accredited professional who's going to hold the reins, seated as close to the power as possible. So in our arrangement with the D&C contractors, with the principal contractor, they're the people who commit the money, who make the decisions around spending. For me, that's the place to have the ISAP sitting. You don't want them too far away at arm's length, because otherwise they can be dismissed or their advice can be ignored. Another thing we use in delivering is just some software that enabled us to communicate with, delegate deliverables to a wide array of people, but also keep track of the status of the deliverables. So we used a piece of software called ODS Track. It was quite useful for that purpose. And then the last point there is around persistence. I think that you do come across cynical people. You come across some very enthusiastic people, but some people, when they hear the name, here comes the sustainability person, they get a bit cynical. I think the thing with them is to translate and stick to material issues or their material issues, and not only talk about them, but stick to them, and then give them targeted information. They don't necessarily need the full sustainability spectrum presented to them. There'll be parts of it that apply to them and that they're passionate about. And then when you are dealing with them, basic questions, just repeat them. If they can't explain to you why something can't be done or should be done, then you have to hit them with another basic question. And I think, they're my top tips. The final thing I'll say is that at the outset of the ISCA rating that you're applying on your project, you can't predetermine the outcomes. So people will ask you many times, "Oh, but what am I going to get for this? I'm putting in money here. What am I going to get for this?" You can't necessarily give them the answers, but if they commit to the process, it will generate positives. So that's a tricky one to manage, but I think it's good. It's a good fact to be aware of.
I'm Sophie Wallace. I'm the Sustainability and Innovation Manager for the NorthLink project, advising Main Roads on all of the packages, both the southern section, the central section and the northern section of NorthLink. I was part of the consortium during the project development phase, the earlier phase where we were planning and making decisions about the options for NorthLink, and working in partnership with Main Roads with really a big focus on identifying the opportunities and positive legacies that we could leave behind after the project is finished. So the team during that early phase built some really strong relationships with stakeholders, which informed the design. And one of the reasons that worked really well is because the design team was very receptive to taking on the local knowledge of people and taking on knowledge from the industry groups that we spoke to, so whether that was freight industry groups or cycling associations. They were all involved in that early consultation phase, and understanding their needs and their knowledge about the local area really fed into the concept design that was then put out to tender. Okay, so the project has been working for a long time with technical specialists within Main Roads. The project offers a great opportunity to trial some new technologies and to understand what can work, and this should result in some good energy savings across the project from a few different lighting options that are being trialled in each of the sections. And it'll also result in some good material savings because it's an opportunity to apply some of the alternative materials and reuse of materials in the pavement treatments across the three different sections of the project. Some of the tips I would say would be worth thinking about are that good sustainability solutions can sometimes fall through the cracks between the different phases of projects. So as you move from one phase to another, if the team changes, then some of the good ideas that came up earlier on are not necessarily understood or taken up by the next phase. So one of the things that this project has done really well is to maintain quite a strong ongoing team to oversee what's happening across the different phases and to really understand the opportunities as they come up in the earlier phase, perhaps at more a strategic level. They move down through the phases and get much more, tangible as contractors come on board and are able to implement those opportunities. And so having that continuous team overseeing the project makes a big difference to not losing out on some of those good opportunities. Another place that you can lose sustainability opportunities is from one physical section of the project to the next. And where you've got a program with three different sections of project, we need to make sure that there's good integration between those teams, that they're learning lessons which can then be passed on to the next stage and the next stage. And so that's another thing that we're putting in processes to make sure that happens. In terms of bridging the gap between one phase to the next, I've been involved in the Sustainability Leadership Committee that has been set up by John Holland to tie together the sustainability initiatives for stage one. And that's been really valuable in terms of being able to answer questions or pass on any of the things that we learnt in the earlier phase, and to smooth the process of making decisions and advising Main Roads about what sustainability priorities there might be for that section of the project. In terms of the interfaces between the different sections of NorthLink, the plan is, as the new contractors come on board for stage 2 and stage 3, that we will organise regular catch-up sessions, which will allow the different teams to share knowledge about what they've learnt from going through the process so far, and just to talk about topics of interest and to understand from ISCA what the latest developments have been with the ISCA rating. But probably the main tip that I would have is to think really early about the unique challenges and opportunities that you have for your project and in the local area where the project sits. So there will be local communities that are there, there'll be different environmental systems there, and the more the project sort of understands all of those different systems, then the more it's able to take up opportunities or to find sustainable solutions to challenges. So getting the whole team to think about that context at a really early stage is a great way for them to sort of understand what sustainability can look like. And what it means is that they'll be thinking of developing a project that has good sustainability outcomes, and that will follow through to a good IS rating because you'll have really good team buy-in to understanding what the rating's trying to achieve. So, for example, for the NorthLink project in the southern section, it's quite an urban area, and so that has challenges to do with connectivity and urban design and construction during, under quite heavy traffic. The central section also has some urban areas, but it has a lot more environmental areas which need to be taken care of. And water quality is a really big issue there because it sits across a water catchment protection area. So early on we got designers and landscape designers, environmental people and drainage specialists together to work out what some of the good innovations could be to make sure that area is protected, and also to hopefully contribute to reduced nutrient loadings eventually into the Swan River. So that's an opportunity that we had in that area. And in the northern section, we're talking about a much more rural area and the transition really from the urban area to the rural area as the highway heads up north into the Pilbara. So by understanding those different contexts, we're much better able to address the sustainability issues that are relevant to those different areas.